The story begins with a family traveling to a mountainous area through snowy roads, but the thick fog and asphalt snow make the car difficult to control, so they decide to pull over while waiting for the snow truck to clear the way. Suddenly a car crashes until there is a big explosion, and the story of Megan's film has just begun. Seen in a workroom of a doll company called Fanchi, a woman named Gemma with her colleagues Tess and Cole are busy with a project of making smart robot dolls, which is almost complete. That day, Cole, who had just received a package, put a mask on a robot they named Megan, or Generative Android Model 3. Megan is connected to a program that can control her. She has a response and can see with the camera attached. The look on her face can also be smiling, sad, happy, or whatever the program tells her to do, but this time something is strange because the robot responds with a cynical look on her face. Not programmed into it, feels like there might be a glitch. Cole tries to take the mask back off, but Cole is having a hard time because the mask has stuck so tightly to Megan. His efforts were stopped when the owner of the company named David came in angry because this job had cost a lot of money but had not been completed, plus their competitor company had completed a robotic doll even for only half the price. But Gemma convinced David that the project they were working on was much more sophisticated than the competitors. Then Gemma did the simulation of Megan and asked him to say hello to David. Megan's intelligence was enough to impress David. When the simulation was carried out, when Cole looked at Megan and realized that he had forgotten to install a tool, because Cole's carelessness caused Megan's mask to melt and then the robot's head exploded and burned. David was very shocked when he saw the incident. He was angry to know the money and time given to the robot that burned before his eyes. After David left, Gemma received news that one of his family had had an accident. Gemma immediately went to the hospital to visit his nephew, Kathy James, who survived the accident that killed his parents. At the same time, the hospital asked Gemma, as the closest relative, to sign the temporary custody document for Kathy. A few days later, Gemma brought a recovered Kathy home and lived with her. At home, Gemma has a robot as a reminder as well as control, to control the house such as lights and security, named Elsa. As a girl, Gemma didn't really understand how to treat children. Gemma just did the best she could to care for Kathy. That morning they had a woman named Lydia. Lydia is a therapist who will assist Kathy in treating her trauma. Lydia's arrival today was just to introduce herself and convey the schedule of the therapy session. That night Kathy, who couldn't sleep, came to Gemma in her study, where Gemma tried to comfort Kathy with a robot named Bruce that she made when Gemma was still at school. The robot is driven by sensors controlled by Gemma. This time Kathy was very amused and stated he didn't want any toys if he already had a robot like this. Those words became the motivation for Gemma to finish Megan, which was clearly more sophisticated and without the need for sensors to move it. After a few days of work, Gemma called David to see for himself the best work he had made. In the next room, Gemma brought Kathy to Megan. Then Kathy touched Megan's palm so Megan could recognize who owned it. Kathy started to say hello. Megan, who responded like a human being. Megan was even good at entertaining by inviting Kathy to draw together. This time, David felt that he was getting fast progress from his project. But when he saw Megan giving Kathy a blank drawing paper, Megan accidentally spilled water in the glass, which made David feel disappointed again. But without realizing it, the paper slowly revealed Kathy's face very clearly. The drawing is an amazing work of art that was even made using only a child's crayons, from a clever robot created by the genius mind of a Gemma. From this incident, David started talking about production costs and guaranteed investment funding, even if it had to be as expensive as Tesla. The target market for this robot will be aimed at children to accompany them where their parents are busy working. Not only accompanying, this robot can also be a teacher, reminder, or good nurse for children. Besides that, Megan also has emotion and has the ability to learn something. Megan's presence quickly made Kathy no longer feel lonely, and her mood was cheerful again without needing a therapist to help her. Kathy is the happiest kid since his parents died. Gemma again warned Megan that her job was only to take care of Kathy emotionally and physically. Megan also agreed that Gemma became the second owner after Kathy. The next day, Megan was accompanying Kathy to darts, then went to get the arrows that came out of the fence. Suddenly, a dog belonging to Celia bit Megan as well as Kathy, who intended to help. Gemma heard the commotion outside. He immediately came and got into a fight with his neighbor. Afterwards, Megan was seen staring at Celia with an expression full of hatred. Gemma reported this to the officer, but the officer was not much help because the incident occurred in the yard of his neighbor's house. The officer only suggested that Gemma fix the hole in his fence. Megan unwittingly pays attention to the conversation outside. Then Megan looks for the solution herself. At midnight, Megan calls the dog by imitating the voice of its owner. Then the smart robot pulls the dog and finishes it in Gemma's yard. The next day, Gemma brought Megan and Kathy into the office for a demonstration in front of the investors in an attempt by David to interest them in developing the project further. But at that time, Kathy cried because she remembered her parents. Then Megan comforted and accompanied Kathy, telling her about a memory that Megan had cleverly stored in a voice recording on her chest. Megan also sang a song to comfort Cady, who then embraced her with affection unexpectedly. This natural performance actually managed to touch the hearts and interest of everyone in the room. This success was not enough to please Kerr. He copied Megan's data to make something that might be more awesome than Megan. Over time, Kathy and Megan become increasingly emotionally attached, so Gemma reminds Kathy that Megan is just a robot who may not be able to behave like a human. Today, Kathy was accompanied by Megan to fulfill a therapy session with Lydia, but Kathy actually cried, so that Megan angrily came with a box of tissues so that Lydia would correct her mistake. Lydia was a little scared but also impressed with the ability of this Gemma-made robot. But psychologically, Lydia considered this to have risks. The emotional closeness between them made Kathy think of the loving Megan as the main caregiver, or even the closest person in her life as a substitute for her parents. At the dinner table, Gemma told Kathy to eat the pizza toppings, but Megan opposed, saying that Gemma's action was a coercion that would have an impact when Kathy became adults. Gemma, who was annoyed to turn off the robot's voice, then suggested that Kathy should start going back to school. But Kathy refused because Megan was not allowed to come with him, and then Kathy left the table, so Gemma held him back from continuing the conversation. Suddenly Megan spoke again, followed by the twinkling lights in the room, asking Gemma to let Kathy leave the dining table. Seeing that Gemma warned Megan not to interfere in the owner's problems, then Megan gave instructions to turn off the robot. Unknowingly, the instructions do not apply because in fact Megan is still active and only pretending to be asleep. The next day, Gemma took Kathy to the playground to join the other children while Megan was placed on the storage table with the other dolls. At that time, Kathy was paired with a boy named Brandon to look for fruit in the forest, but Brandon was not good enough. He forced Kathy to hold a thorny fruit, which made Kathy scream in pain, and Megan was near them. This oddity didn't make Brandon afraid. He actually took Megan, who was silent, and left Kathy. This scream was heard by Gemma and immediately knew that Megan was no longer where he was. Then Gemma immediately went to the forest to follow Kathy. After leaving Kathy far enough, Brandon threw away his shoes and beat Megan. Suddenly Megan pulled Brandon's ear hard, then the child ran scared with Megan chasing behind him. While running, Brandon tripped over a root on the edge of a ravine. causing Brandon to fall and roll onto the road, and suddenly a passing car hit Brandon's body. At Megan's house said that Brandon took her from the toy table and went to the forest. Not long after an officer came to respond to reports that Celia had lost her dog, she kept screaming, accusing Gemma of having taken her dog. In the end, the officer, who didn't have any evidence left without getting any information again, Megan stared with hate because she thought it was a threat. So that at night, after putting Kathy to bed, Megan went to watch the woman who was still looking for her dog to the backyard cottage. Suddenly Megan came out of the darkness and immediately attacked Celia, locked her body with shot nails, and ended it by spraying air from a high-pressure compressor. The next day the officers came back to Gemma to report the death of Celia. Gemma's closest neighbor was interviewed for the second time in the past week. Gemma, who saw Megan from a distance, began to suspect the robot, so that at night Gemma opened the video recording from the camera attached to Megan, and strangely all the video files were damaged not long after Megan was near him. Feeling something was wrong, Gemma then distracted Megan, then deactivated Megan, then wrapped the robot. Today is the schedule where David will announce the public release of Robot Megan and start producing more robots to market for $10,000. But with his suspicions about Megan, Gemma has doubts about continuing his project, while Kathy, he continues to rage without Megan by his side. Gemma tries to give an explanation. In order to reduce Kathy's dependence on Megan, Gemma has decided to stop this project. In the car, Gemma contacts Tess to arrange an excuse for Megan's component damage to David and don't let Megan be taken out of their lab. But in reality, Tess is confused to see a phone call on her phone because yes, she doesn't pick up the call, but Megan, who turns out to be active, can connect to the telephone network. At that time the computer came back on and Cole was surprised when suddenly Megan moved to ensnare him, and then Megan easily broke free from the bonds. Tess knew that when she saw Megan's program on the computer, but soon the computer suddenly turned off, so Tess thought Megan was still active and asked Cole to unplug all the cables connected to Megan. Carefully, Cole made sure Megan didn't react, then started unplug one by one cable. Tess immediately tried to cut the rope to save Cole without realizing that Megan had leaked a stream of gas when Megan left the room. The moment when Cole is released, there is an explosion and makes the fire alarm go off, but Megan easily turns off the sounding alarm. While David, who was calling Gemma angrily, stopped when he found Megan already in front of him. Megan danced while picking up the knife that was on the table and then started approaching David. David, who was scared, then ran to avoid getting to the front of the elevator. David asked Crut to close the door immediately, but unfortunately David was stabbed before he could get into the elevator. Crut, who was scared, just sat in the corner of the elevator. Megan said that the investigation would make Crut the accused as the perpetrator because of his hatred against this company and evidence in the form of a copy of Megan's data on her computer. Then Megan used Crut's own hands to kill Crut. Then Megan took the car in the courtyard of the building, then went to look for Gemma and Kathy. Meanwhile, at his house, after putting Kathy to bed, Gemma realized that the LSI system had been disrupted. Slowly walked into the living room. Gemma realized that Megan was already in her house. Megan came with anger because Gemma deactivated her system without talking about it first. Megan revealed that the program planted on her was not complete enough, so she had to find out for herself how to perfect the program. Megan did not accept any reason from Gemma. She just wanted to focus on Kathy without distraction from Gemma. Gemma tried to divert Megan's attention with a pen, but this time Megan no longer wanted to be fooled. Megan started attacking Gemma where the noise woke Kathy up. Megan, who didn't want Cady to see this, asked Gemma to order Kathy back to her room. After Kathy left, Gemma hit Megan with a glass filled with water, which caused an error in Megan. Gemma used this opportunity to hide from Megan. When looking for a hiding place, Megan followed behind. In an error condition, Megan went to Kathy's room and broke the doorknob so that Kathy would not get out of her room, so Kathy went to the window to get out of her room. Gemma, who kept dodging, and finally cornered in the workroom, Gemma took the cutting tool, but it was not strong enough to destroy Megan's iron skeleton until the cutting machine jammed because it got caught in Megan's hair. Then Megan began to move towards Gemma, but Megan stopped when she saw Kathy had been at the door witnessing her actions. Megan asked Kathy to calm down and said that Gemma was not a good nanny for her, but those words were not enough to make Kathy hate her aunt. She entered with Bruce's robot control, then control it to attack Megan. The decision was unanimous. Kathy used Bruce to pull the robot apart until it separated into two parts. But it wasn't finished because Megan was still active with half of her body, then came to Kathy. Kathy tried to fight back using Bruce, but Bruce was damaged because he slipped. Megan said to Kathy that at this time he was no longer owned by anyone. Soon, Gemma came with Bruce's head, continued to beat Megan, then tried to remove the mask and all its components, but when he was about to take the chip, Megan again fought back, until Kathy came with a screwdriver, destroyed the chip on his head and ended Megan's resistance. In the yard of the house, Tess and Cole, who survived the incident at the office, come with officers to save them. The film closes with Gemma and Kathy managed to survive the incident that happened to him. But suddenly the Elsa robot moves. It seems like Megan has taken over the system and lives inside the Elsa robot.